streaming, and then I think it's working. I'm watching the YouTube screen here. Okay, yeah. So I guess it's working. All right. Welcome everybody. Sorry, not a lot of lead in there. We were just chatting, and then I just hit. I said I'm gonna start streaming now in the middle of your sentence.
No worries. Just getting going over Ancestral Health Symposium 2011. Good memories.
Oh yeah, yeah. We found some pictures. Some of them may one day make it onto some funny posts. Some of them may forever hide in darkness. Um, okay, so uh, there may not be actually an audience. Okay, there's like three people.
No worries.
Yeah, whatever. So I'm just gonna act like I'm speaking to an audience. So, welcome everybody, episode 3 of Kyle and Friends. This is gonna be a big one. We got the old, the Danny Roddy, the D Rod, and so this is the first time. So we've been on a couple, like two, maybe three streams of viewer stuff together,
Mhm.
and then you and I and Leo did a stream on his channel a couple months ago, which I went back and watched actually recently. Uh,
I loved it. I'm waiting for Leo to give the word on doing another one.
yeah, yeah, it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good. Um, and so anyway, now I'm on. So now I'm on this side, so I get to ask, I guess, you questions. I guess that's my job. So I'm just gonna. So we have a topic, sort of a loose. We have a yeah, we have a loose topic, and we have some things that we're gonna talk about. Obviously, there's a title of this video that is like the loose topic. But before that, I'm just gonna try to let's see. Let's ask you something that maybe you haven't been asked before. What, if any, is your relationship with exercise, and specifically, with the repeat perspective that you have?
I walk a shitload, and so I walk almost everywhere around town. Aside from doing kind of like body weight stuff, that's pretty limited. So it's not like an area of expertise. And so if I'm talking to someone, they're asking me like exercise questions, I would make sure they knew that it wasn't my forte. So I say to talk to Nicholas Simpson or Rob Turner at Functional Performance Systems, or somebody like yourself, or even Leo.
Even
But
Leo.
even though that was unnecessarily harsh. So just to save that, Leo's Instagram of the things he can do is absolutely incredible, and so that wasn't warranted. But yeah, I don't know. I've had health problems for a long time, and a lot of times when I started exercising, it would exacerbate them. So it was kind of like I don't know. It's kind of like a between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. I've had some of that. So I've noticed that like one of my exercise hobbies is jujitsu, and I don't train very consistently anymore. And anybody that happens to watch this stream from my gym is gonna like be chuckling at that because they know that they're always like, "Hey," like texting me like, "Come train tonight." Um, and when I do, and when I train really hard, like it's not really. Sometimes it doesn't feel so good afterwards, and it's interesting. I think we were. Oh no, this was another stream. I was talking to somebody about exercise and how, exercise is considered healthy, and more exercise is considered more healthy, and that's a real misconception. And I think exercise is like part of a healthy, balanced breakfast. But yeah, obviously, if it makes you feel like crappy, not just fatigued, but like makes your body feel bad, then you're either doing too much or like the wrong kind of thing. And it does seem like there's kind of a repeat. That seems to be a split in the repeat world between people that came from a pro exercise place, and so they just have that as a default thing. Like it's just part of their life. And then people that came to the repeat perspective from maybe more like chronic illness, and they're just trying to limit stress as much as possible. And they might say like, oh, don't exercise at all ever.
Yeah, just to be clear, I would never tell somebody not to exercise. Like if they were saying, "Hey, I'm dealing with really severe hypothyroid symptoms," I would say maybe experiment with not doing like really strenuous exercise. I can't imagine that would make a situation better. But I really resonate with the second part, the second side of the repeat community, the people that are really ill. And so I've said this a few times, but I think that's the content that I make for people. It's not like I think people do the exercise and kind of the Chad phenotype way better than I do. Like that's not my realm, I guess.
Right on, right on. I should.
That's Leo's realm.
Yeah. Have you ever talked about exercise before in any of your stuff?
I can't. Maybe somebody asked it on a live stream, but I
Yeah.
can't recall
That's
talking
why I
about.
just wanted to ask you because I don't think that's ever been explicitly asked. Ray doesn't really exercise, right? He's described himself as a sedentary person.
Well, he's to Brad and Jeremy, the directors that you love. they they when they talked to him, he said he went skiing 10 years ago. That was exercise.
Yeah. Well, that can simulate protein synthesis for several days. So, um, yeah. Well, I think, especially somebody who's not looking to have any specific type of physique or whatever. I mean, you know, gardening is good. I think a lot of things that people can do, like walking and that kind of thing, that just use their body and are relaxing, like that's probably the most health promoting like exercise. And then in terms of trying to alter your endocrinology, like say stimulate testosterone production as a man, resistance training. Um, and yeah, no 24-hour. I'm reading a comment here. No 24-hour dry fasted cold hormesis deep fat adapted ketone powered high intensity interval exercise or training. No, no, that would actually be like, yeah. So that's the opposite of what we're talking about here. Although if somebody wants to be a Navy SEAL or something, um, and that's their goal, then it is what it is, and they have to do things like that and put their body through stress, and they have to do it, and you could like support that with nutrition and try to do the best you can, but that shouldn't be confused with a health regimen.
In fact, I mean, you could correct me on this, but it might be advantageous to have a lower pulse if you're doing like I talked to a Marine today. I don't think it'd be, or he was maybe an ex-Marine. I don't think it would have been useful for him to have an extremely high metabolic rate when he was a Marine. Like that would have been like not useful. Having to eat every 3 or 4 hours or something. I don't think that would have been helpful.
Yeah, yeah, you want to be on that warrior diet.
You want to slow down the rate of metabolism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, extend the life.
You and Leo talked about the warrior diet, but I also did that. What was it about Ori that was so compelling?
um I personally, I think it was that he connected the burgeoning idea of intermittent fasting and constrained window eating. So he got really early on. In fact, he got a little too early on that, which is one of the things I kept saying. Is he's sort of like a unsung hero or grandfather, father, whatever of that movement, and people don't really talk about him. But his book is almost 20 years old now, and
Mhm.
but he connected that to all sorts of like ancient history, like Greece and Rome, and soldiers and marches and the way that their rations would be distributed and hunter gatherer stuff. And he sort of connected it all together in like a holistic philosophy. And I think that was compelling to people. Sort of like paleo was a compelling thing, oh, look at the seasonal availability of this and that and ice ages. And it's a whole kind of thing that really fills in a lot of things that people like to capture their imagination for like a holistic way of eating and way of being philosophically. Uh,
I Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Somebody just asked, do you have a quiver of arrows leaning against your wall in the background? Yes.
Oh, you.
Sorry. No,
I was
no.
like, do you shoot arrows? I didn't know that.
I haven't shot arrows for a while, but when I moved to Florida, I just threw all of the things in my house in New Jersey in a U-Haul. So there's a few items that I haven't actually. All I've done is just move them from room to room. I haven't quite found a place, good place for my quiver of arrows, but they really it ties a room together in any room that it's in. So you can't really go
Well,
wrong.
you know who else shoots arrows, right?
Who?
Polly Salads.
Oh, just for hunting or for leisure?
I don't know. I just seeing it on his Instagram. Maybe a little column A, a little column B.
Yeah, that's extremely impressive. We should listen to him now. Yeah, he's is he? I think he's kind of dipping into the Ben Greenfield persona there. You know who that is, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he does like he has some of that Joe Rogan energy, like hunting wild meat, like compression
I,
pants.
yeah, I know we talk about him a lot. I'm sure people are bored, but it really is an interesting case study related to the video you made. Like his transition and kind of the marketing. Like Ben Greenfield is, I see him more like a Dave Asprey, where he's a biohacker and he's trying all these different things to live longer, and then he's also incorporating so-called ancestral nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul is really playing up the ancestral consistency part.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's taking from all these different things and seeing what works. And it would, I should have predicted this because when I first saw Dave Asprey, I was just so turned off, and very superficially. It was because of his looks, and it just doesn't work to have a man who, I'm not going to say isn't attractive or anything like that, although I would say that, but specifically, his face looks aged. Uh,
Well, he did. Sorry, go ahead.
just Dave Asprey. So somebody would eventually take his place in that marketing biohacker world that just looks more like what people are aspiring to, like looking better, longer. Because nobody actually wants to look like maybe his blood looks good, which it doesn't, Dave Asprey's blood. But even if it did, nobody wants to like look like Dave Asprey. But there are men want to look like Paulie Salads.
Well, sorry if we talked about this already, but do you know who Dr. Delgado is? He's a vegan.
I knew who he was and I forgot. I'm familiar with the name, but
Anyways, he does like live blood analysis where he'll take a person's blood and then show it on a screen and say like, oh, this means there's tons of oxidative stress, or this
mhm.
means there's an infection or whatever. And they did it at a conference with Dave Asprey. And Dr. Delgado was like, this is like some of the worst blood ever seen. And well, the funny thing was, Dave had an excuse for like every single thing that he's like, oh, I had wine 2 weeks ago. Oh, I stayed in a hotel with mold. That's why that is like that. But I don't know. Dave is an interesting case study too. And again, like Paul and Dave are almost like I almost construct everything I do in the complete opposite of how they do it. Like that would be my ideal goal, would be to do everything the opposite, just because I think we've talked about authoritarianism and like kind of the doctor attitude. And and also like the pseudo experience of like kind of knowing it all.
Mhm.
And I think that's so obnoxious.
Yeah, and it's a very limp authoritarianism that uh, they exude because they kind of just go with the flow. Like they're specifically Paul Saladino. I think Dave Asprey, because he got in earlier, he was more of a taste maker. But a lot of the products that people are willing to spend money on and the tastes that they have been set to a certain extent. So it just so happens that Paul Saladino is playing to marketable trends, and then kind of like uh there's a parade and he is jumping in front of it, and then like I'm the leader of this
He's
parade.
the grandfather of biohacking.
Right. um so I'm just looking at the comments here to see if there's anybody particularly special. There is. We got Miss Heidi Vincent. Do you know her? Have you ever talked to her?
Yeah, yeah, I like Heidi.
Yeah, yeah, she's a friend of the repeat community.
Yeah.
She is staying up extra late because she lives in, I don't know exactly which time zone in the Netherlands. Do you know what that time zone is?
Mm-mm.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people care about that time zone. This is not a representative sample of the world or anything, but it's significantly later for her. So thank you, Heidi. All right. So the topic at hand is discussing how nutrition is discussed, and specifically, so I made that video about this, so-called law that I'm proposing, which is that you can, even scientifically, sort of demonstrate evidence on both sides of almost every question. Uh, so I would ask you, have you experienced that when you're talking to people that they would say, "Oh, well, how about this paper or how about that paper?" And how do you deal with that? Like, if you're giving somebody advice, somebody's asking you a question, and you might use a, you might give an answer based on your personal experience, or you might give a source or something, and then if they start to do like a dueling studies thing with you, like, well, how about this, calorie restricted mice live longer, or they just throw something at you, how how do you deal with that?
Not clunkily, probably most of the time, because when you start explaining all the little details of how when running on adrenaline and cortisol, you can feel awesome, and it's not going to last forever in most cases. And also the thing you referenced in the video of how radiation could mitigate some symptoms, and of course, our friend Lex Rooker, when I talked to him one time, I was hanging out with him. He had like pretty intense acne scars, and he said he used to get shot radiation in his face to have his acne go away. And so, I don't think I would have learned those things if like you and I have collectively been in the health world for probably like 10 plus years. Like that was something I learned way later, and so. So I guess I would probably resort to some kind of anecdote rather than trying to like totally confuse the person, because a lot of the times I'm talking to somebody and this is like their first foray into adjusting their diet, and so you just like that's why I do two consultations with anybody that signs up, because I think the first one is so ridiculously confusing that I think the second one is sometimes a little bit more helpful. And
Mm.
that wasn't a plug, that was just truth. Uh, but yeah, I thought the video was fantastic. I think it was came from a mature place in the nutrition world, and I think yeah, and again, I that dueling studies approach is so useless. So I'm lucky; not that many people are sending me studies asking for my specific opinion. I think that would be more your territory, because that's just not outside my realm of experience. But um, yeah, it's again speaking to your video, it's how complex everything is, and it's you can you again going on a carnivore diet, I can make a case that that's useful. It increases the protein, restricts the polyunsaturated fat, probably lowers the endotoxin, but that doesn't mean you'd want to do it forever.
Right on. uh I think I have to do a retraction. I said Netherlands, didn't I? And Heidi corrected me that she's actually in Denmark. The gosh darn Danish and Dutch are always confusing people with you know, their countries.
Which people do you most resonate with, Kyle?
mm, I would have to say Denmark because, well, see, the Dutch are kind of like the bridge from the continental Germanics to the British Islanders,
Mhm.
and whereas Denmark is like the bridge from continental Germanics into Scandinavia, and those are all, at least according to 23andMe, high levels of Kyle genetic activity. Um, I think I'm only like 8% Swedish, and then some higher percent German, and then I think the highest percent British Isles, both England and Ireland. So uh, that's a tough one. I'm torn. I'm torn between Danish and Dutch. I think I probably have genetics sort of similar to those places because they're like in between the Germanic diaspora, which is like the majority of my ancestry. Have you ever done anything like that? Have you given your genes to Google for safekeeping?
I've never done it. My mom's last name is Cerencioni, and so I think I have a large amount of Italian blood.
Hmm.
But my dad is a mutt, and he's just mixed of everything.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I actually I just bought a kit. It didn't arrive yet from Ancestry, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to do a stream in the future comparing the results of 23andMe and Ancestry.com on the Ancestry to sort of, uh, I guess, score their precision,
Mm-hmm.
like if there's huge differences. And then I also bought the health thing, so maybe I'll do one stream about the Ancestry and how accurate or I guess precise they are, and uh, and then maybe the health thing. It's like it'd be pretty bad if they gave you different results on major SNPs of disease markers, like you do or don't have, say, the breast cancer gene or something like that. That would be like a pretty bad flub.
Well, didn't they used to? You could send in your DNA info, and then they would tell you the risk for certain diseases, and then maybe they stopped because they were getting sued or something.
Yeah, they stopped with. I don't know what else they stopped with. I'm just familiar with the breast cancer one because that one is really the only one that's very highly correlated. So if you have that particular polymorphism, you're really in trouble. The other ones are like, say 50% chance would be like really high. And, a lot of them are like 25% of people that have this, get this disease, or 10% or something like that. But the breast
Mhm.
cancer one, it's pretty bad. And they would actually make you click. I remember when I had it, they gave you a thing like a release kind of form, like to see this, I'm not going to like this is not a medical diagnosis. It's like an extra step to see the breast cancer genes. And I think they probably got rid of that and maybe a couple other of the more sensitive ones. But they still have like I was just looked at it a couple months ago, and they have like celiacs related genes and stuff related to I forget all, but just common like genetic recessive conditions mostly. Uh, which, by the way, I have no alleles for any of. In case any women are out there thinking about a potential match and children making, just making sure that I'm totally clear about that. Uh, okay, so yeah, dueling studies. Really, the issue is that I was trying to get at there is that, well, I was sort of hinting at it, which is that the production of science has gotten a little wacky. And
Mhm.
it's almost like you can get, okay, so you know how Fox News exists because MSNBC exists? They
Mhm.
kind of, like, if Fox News disappeared, like if you could Thanos snap, just say right wing media, and
Rothschild Media.
right, well that's both. That's
Exactly.
just the media, um, and that would be worth a Thanos snap. But if you could just Thanos snap one side of the old sandwich, so to speak, the other side wouldn't be able to persist as such as it is. It would, because it exists on that oppositional war, like it gets viewership through opposition. Like basically, people tune in. There was a time in America when people tune into the news to get objective information, or they felt it was objective. The country was relatively unified around a narrative, for good or bad. And now people go into the news because they're turn on the news because they hate people that turn on the other news channel. That's
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
really why they're doing it.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, that could be a long discussion about news and media propaganda. But I've noticed that this dynamic, it's a very human dynamic, and it's gotten into things like science. So a lot of science is produced not because somebody sits down and is like, today I shall objectively seek truth on this topic or question, but they're like, man, I hate those vegans, or I hate those carnivores, or I hate whatever. Um, and I'm going to, like, did you watch Arrested Development?
I have a long 20-minute story about this, but no, I never watched
Oh
it.
wait, sorry, I'm not even. I said I meant that's a good show too. I meant, are you? It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. We're just-
I haven't seen it either.
well, there's this one episode where Charlie comes out and he has a screenplay for a musical, and the gang is like, he explains what it's about, and the gang is like, oh, okay, but like versus who? And he's like, no, I just want to like put on this play, and they're like, yeah, but like to like who are we getting with it? Like again, like, and it's almost like science is like that now, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna write a grant for this thing, and pregnant in the process of that, it's all like, oh, versus who? And it's so it like produces the two sides, because science, it used to be really elite and elitist. It still presents as elitist, and it presents itself a certain way, but it's actually become sort of dangerously democratic, and the standards are fairly low to get into it. Um, and so, yeah, it's every year it strays farther from what it used to be and closer to the model of just like two sides barking at each other, like on each issue. So this problem's just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. Uh,
What what would you say those two sides are that you could identify?
well, I would say they're different for each field. So you, uh, for obvious reasons, focus on like health related science fields. So I guess there's different sides, like in medicine, sort of the idea of looking at conditions as, oh, we're gonna, perhaps it's you have a genetic predisposition to this thing, and we're just going to give you this drug or this surgery to take out the problem or whatever, versus like a trying to work with the body, and maybe there's something going on that could be addressed with like nutrition or lifestyle. So yeah, in the medical field, those are two sides, but this goes down all the way to like arguing about this is like Gilbert Ling type stuff, like enzyme kinetics, and should they be studied in like a buffer solution, just like a salty solution, or in a gel type crowded solution, which is something I'm trying to do at work. Actually, I'm trying to integrate some of those ideas. I've been making so much sugar buffer. It's like 40% sugar, which is about as much as you can get for it to dissolve in like a potassium phosphate and sodium chloride buffer solution. At one time, I dropped it on the while I was making it, and it's just like sugar water, like sticky, like everything's sticky immediately.
Well, why were you making this solution? Like what specifically for?
It's called molecular crowding.
Uh,
So the whole Gilbert Ling idea, and then people after that like Pollock, the idea that it's pretty troublesome to study proteins in a watery solution because the cells are not watery at all, and there's almost no bulk water in them. So there's different ways to address that, because you can't really just throw a bunch of random proteins in a cuvette with whatever watery solution you're using, and then the protein of interest, and then study it, because the other ones are going to get in the way, and there's just all kinds of issues. But you can use something called molecular crowding, where you put an osmotically active agent in there, like there's some long chain fibers, like something called phycol. You can use polyethylene glycol of different molecular weights, and sucrose. And if you dump a bunch of this stuff in and dissolve it, it pulls water to it. And that's why, for example, people with lactose intolerance get diarrhea, because the lactose sugar doesn't get absorbed, and it pulls water with it and doesn't let the colon absorb the water. So all of that water just rushes out as like watery feces. Um, so because it's so osmotically active. So you can do the same thing in a cuvette to study a protein, and so it looks like there's a milliliter of a watery solution in there. But if you've got a ton of sugar in that solution, or some polyethylene glycol or some other highly osmotically active agent, it's actually really viscous, and the protein that you have in that solution will have much less bulk water associated with it than if it was just in a regular buffer solution. And hopefully, that helps you at least partially simulate the differences, the conditions inside of the cell. And so this would be like a first step.
so you're kind of stimulating the ordered water and then the wild bulk water. Like, that's how it works, right?
Yeah,
There's like
yeah.
order.
So
Okay.
it draws away because the way a normal just having your protein that you're studying inside of a cuvette of bulk water, there'd be a layer of like 10 waters wide around the each individual unit of the protein that's kind of ordered and structured with the protein, and then just a ton of bulk water, and then the next unit of your protein. And depending on how high the concentration of your protein is, that would be different. But there'd just be a ton of bulk water in between each one. Whereas in the cell, there would be, the layers of ordered water and then a protein kind of right next to it. Kind of like the difference between living in a city, where it's like, hey, here's a house and then here's like 10 feet and then another house. Whereas like in the country, it's like, oh, here's a house and here's 10 miles and another
Mm-hmm.
house. So if you put something like sugar in there, it pulls bulk water away and it sort of shoves the proteins together closer.
Mm-hmm.
So there's less bulk water in between each unit of protein and its associated hydrated radius of ordered water. So eventually, I would like to move towards putting more complex stuff in there and getting closer and closer to a sort of like synthetic approximation of the cell to study protein kinetics and things like that.
Nice.
Uh, Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to check if there's any like interesting questions. And
Okay.
while I do that, you made a suggestion for what we can talk about,
Mm-hmm.
like an addendum to kind of related to the topic of that video, which was, I guess you call them pet peeves or misconceptions in the health sphere. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, let's write down, 5 or 10. I wrote down 6.
Okay.
How many do you have?
I have a bunch, but some of them are kind of overlapping.
Yeah, I wrote down 6 because I was like, well, you're the guest, so you should have more. Um, give priority. Uh, and these were just things that came to my head right away. But so, how about you? Do you want to start with your first one? And
Yeah, well, something I think we could talk about. I want to get your take on, but I think we kind of talked about this on Instagram. But the idea, and again, not to keep bagging on polysalads, but the idea that carbs are still dangerous if you have a broken metabolism. And so I like violently jerk and have an issue with this because I've been hearing it for so long. For example, even in 2011 when we went to Ancestral Health Symposium, I specifically remember people saying this same thing at that conference. And so that's why, again, I feel like Ray clarifies this and makes this statement obsolete. And like the idea carbohydrate can be the cure to a so-called broken metabolism, and if you think of that like the high free fatty acids or the activation of the stress systems and the constant lipolysis blocking the full oxidation of sugar. In fact, do you remember Carbsane, Evelyn?
no,
Okay. Well, she posted. She was constantly butting heads with low carbers, and she had posted a paper that said hyperglycemia. Oh no, what's she saying? Uh, high free high free fatty acids exist long before hyperglycemia. And I remember in my low carb brain like seeing that statement of some paper, and I was like, that's impossible. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And it was one of the things that I think like broke my conditioning. That like specific paper, and it almost like prepared me for the years later of getting into race stuff. But yeah, again, polysalads, and I'm sure other people are using this same thing. Carbs are not dangerous, but if you have a broken metabolism, and I don't know how exactly they're defining that, you should stay away from them. And so again, I go on.
oh no, I'm just laughing because
Yeah,
yes, that is something I've heard so many times, and
yeah,
it's funny.
yeah. So I guess I just want to nip it in the butt before a new generation of low carb people are saying it. But what in my breakdown of that, do you think that's accurate?
Um, so just to sum up, like you're saying that people are treating it, they're almost treating carbs as a luxury that somebody could consume if they're already healthy, and if they're not
Mm-hmm,
healthy, it's just too dangerous,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
not even danger. I mean, it will cause problems,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? When in our perspective, or a lot of people, it's like complete like it, in fact, I would say low carb is the luxury. Like if you if you're a very healthy person, you can probably do a low carb diet and other things like that, like intermittent fasting, um, for much longer than somebody who starts from a place of poor health. So I say, if you're, it's like, oh, yeah, you could do low carb, but not if you have a broken metabolism. You can cut
Well,
out carbs.
I mean, your steroid analogy is so good. Like the on our try cast with Leo. I mean, I thought you knocked it out of the park. I thought that was so good. And so again, I think these concepts, like I am sure a lot of people on, um, like I had never, you probably had heard of this long before. I had not heard of like non-esterified free fatty acid or NEFA or the concept of like fat being liberated in the blood, blocking glucose and things like that. Um, but again, that steroid analogy, and you're attacking your glucose disposal systems, and then a person stops and they're like, why can't I don't know, oxidize glucose? Well, I just thought that was excellent.
Can you remind me of the steroid analogy? Because I actually don't, I don't remember
You
what I
said,
said.
I'm gonna butcher it. You said something like if you're taking testosterone, like most people would realize, if you're taking exogenous testosterone and at some point you stop, you're gonna pay the piper. It's not gonna be a free ride. You're not gonna expect to be exactly like you were when you were a teen or in your 20s or whatever. And then you said that was basically the exact same thing. You're like you're doing steroids, the stress steroids when you're going on a low carb
Stress
diet.
roids.
Yeah, stress rights. And so again, I thought that was a perfect analogy. You're like a master at analogies, but that one was especially good, because I've used it many times, and I should be sending you a paycheck for chronically using
Thanks.
it all the time.
Yeah, I've actually been attacked in the comments of one of my videos. Somebody was like, "How many analogies do you need to make a point?"
I did see it.
And I said 2 to 3.
I think I remember that exactly. I don't know. Those are useful for nutrition world, like you said in your video, that favors complete reductionism. And so those things are important for, I think, getting the message across. Like what Ray is talking about, and I'm not saying you're a devotee to Ray or anything, but what he's talking about is complicated. And so it's much more complicated than don't eat carbs, liberate fat, and be a fat burning beast.
Right.
Like it's such a appealing, simple sell. And what Ray is saying, I think, is much more complex and like, I don't know if convoluted the right word, but it's confusing to try to explain to somebody.
Right. Yeah. Real quick. So somebody asked if I could increase your volume. I'm a little too ignorant to do that on the fly. Uh,
I can try to increase my actual volume on my interface. I don't know if that will help.
it sounds a little louder to me.
What, testing 1 2?
Yeah, I think that's a little louder.
Can't stand my own voice, so let me turn on my speakers.
Oh wait, somebody said my mic is much lower than Danny's. That I probably can.
Well, should I turn back down?
Let's just keep turning up together.
Testing 1 2. Confirm if I'm louder than Kyle or lower. Testing
So
one
I
two.
just turned up my gain a little bit. Do I sound
Mhm.
different to you?
I just have a straight level in my headphones.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure somebody will make a comment if it sounds crappy. Um,
I'm
yeah,
like, wait, maybe I should turn down.
yeah. Okay. So, somebody asked, keto advocates claim that premature aging and death is caused by the high deuterium level in carbs. Therefore, gluconeogenesis is good. Um, oh, we got a positive volume comment, so that's good.
Okay, well, I did turn down. So testing 1 2.
Yeah. Okay, people are saying now it's good. So,
Okay.
all right, great. So, yeah, I have seen few people. I was in a Facebook group about deuterium depletion
Mm-hmm.
before I lost posting privileges to that website. And it was, people were buying devices to take deuterium out of their drinking water, which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to try that. So, okay, there's the deuterium. So that would be the hydrogen in the water. But there's just as much hydrogen in fatty acids as in so I don't understand. I actually don't understand on a chemical level why there'd be more deuterium in carbs. Maybe they're
I think there's a Jack Cruz idea. You know him, right?
yeah, I know the name and I know a lot of people that have come from that world, but I am exquisitely ignorant of Jack Cruz. I've never been on, I guess he has a website and stuff. I've never watched a video of his. Nothing. Not on
This
purpose, just by accident.
Well, it's funny we're talking about this because I bought beet sugar like a week ago, and it's the first time I've ever had beet sugar. And so I was kind of noodling around on my Evernote, and I found a quote of Ray saying that beet sugar had less deuterium than normal cane sugar. And so know literally nothing about deuterium except apparently you don't want any.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that would be because more deuterium would be. So the beet sugar is grown in places where it's probably pulling from deep water sources,
Mm-hmm.
and that there'd be more deuterium in the surface water of the planet. So something like cane sugar, is irrigated on islands and stuff. Um, yeah, that starts to get into that world of. Now, I don't have a word for this. I should probably try to come up with a word for this, but there's a certain vibe in in the health sphere where people, and it's the same vibe I feel when people start going down real like permanent conspiracy theory loops, which is like everything is bad for you, and it's like, man, don't even bother like with your diet because there's just deuterium in everything, or like where and then they're like opening up the Bible and like finding verses, and and it's very paralyzing to action. If somebody's like, well, don't even bother trying to improve this, because if you don't, like, oh, you have Wi-Fi in your house, well, I mean, you might as well just be eating like, just sucking the cooking vats from McDonald's, like the used cooking oil. Don't ever try to improve anything if you can't fix everything. And also, I will just keep adding things that you have to fix forever.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very like, it's like it's like nutrition anon, like, or like health anon.
And needless to say, it's completely unhelpful. If somebody's coming to you asking for, again, not to keep praise Ray, but
Oh, I thought you were
him
going to go after Paul again.
oh no, maybe I will though soon. But Ray saying like a caller on KMUD saying like, I have PMS, I can't sleep at night, I have depression, I have arthritis, I have IBS, and Ray saying, "Oh, can you eat the carrot salad every day?" Just these like little things to try to improve the life. Like, I don't know how successful I am at it, but that's always my approach of just these trying to talk about these small things that a person can do to improve their life, and then hopefully it has like a ripple effect to not to sound too hippie, but like to expand consciousness or awareness of themselves to be able to do other things like in an autonomous way, And so I think you're right. If again, I probably identified with that approach years ago of like the all or nothing, like, oh, you got to do this or you're never going to be healthy. But then again, like your video says, that what is health is a complicated question. And I don't even think that many people are exploring that question in like a rational way.
Yeah, it actually really bothers me, because that mindset is something that people with poor health are easy prey for, because
Mm-hmm.
they're maybe not thinking clearly. They're in a certain type of precarity or desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, not necessarily all of the people that are saying this or that are intentionally preying on those people, but certainly some of them are. And that's pretty disgusting. And actually, I have some content coming up that's going to not, go after. So my intention with, that first video, the Kyle's First Law video, that's going to be a part of a trilogy, which is not going to have 3 laws, but 2. So there's going to be 2 laws, and then a third video that it doesn't really, the way it's stated wouldn't really be appropriate to call it a law. It's just some philosophical musings on why the health sphere is the way it is.
Is there going to be a Gautier remix in the second quarter?
I
If it is, I'm not going to watch
well, I guess there's got to be.
it.
um, but yeah, I guess I'll call it like this social epistasis, analysis of nutrition trilogy or something, and then from there, because I want to give people tools not to just analyze nutrition, but like, why are people doing what they're doing? Why are people saying what they're saying? And do these people have your best interests in mind? Like when you watch a YouTube video or you go on a website and you see people arguing and like owning each other in the comments, like, oh, you bleep, 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 idiot. Don't you even know that, hold on, there's something here, that coffee has ochratoxins, fuminisins, acrylamide. That's something somebody commented, that Saladino says coffee has these chemicals, and then asked, do the metabolic benefits offset this? I don't know anything about that. Coffee has a lot of chemicals in it. I mean, it's you know, a seed.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a paper that says has 1,000 substances in it.
Yeah, and counting.
I don't want to skip over what we're talking about now, but this was actually one of the things on my list. Like people being, I did watch his coffee thing, and the amount of, like, you could almost make a Kyle's rule about the amount of certitude expressed by a person being like the likelihood that it's incorrect, because I can't. It also, for somebody that has been totally wrong, like had just switched a paradigm, is now coming out and being like coffee is unhelpful, or is I don't think people should drink it. It's just like the humility is absent. And I understand that's a marketing tactic. It's not necessarily useful to be like vulnerable or to say you don't know. Mm-hmm. But again, it's just crazy.
Yeah, that's a problem that I have. A lot of people online and even in my personal life, they'll ask me questions about nutrition, and I don't have the constitution to say, oh, do this. This is the correct thing that you should do. This is good. This is bad. I start saying things in however way I'm wording them, and people kind of get a little bit of a blank stare. And I think it's because, and not to insult anybody, because it's not really their fault, they can't interact with information that way because of things like the news that have retarded their brain. They crave and require oppositional certitude, that there's one side, there's another side, and there's some type of quasi holy war, and they need to pick a side. They need to be told what the correct, true, righteous side is and go with that. And I don't feel comfortable. And there's a few things that I always recommend, like, cutting out PUFAs, like simple things like not cooking with vegetable oil. I'm comfortable telling everybody to do that. There's really no downside there. But, very quickly it gets to questions where I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know. It depends. Like, you could make this huge dietary change, but if that's really hard for you to do, it might not be worth the cost, and
in San Francisco, those questions would arise when I was at like a dinner party with people, and there was a ballerina named Fran. And anytime we'd be eating and people would be like, Danny, is this good for me to eat? And I'm just going to pass this one to Fran. Strategy to get through those questions, because they happen all the time. And you're right. It's especially when you're eating, it's not especially helpful to be like, oh yeah, this is junk. It's going to ferment in your stomach or something. It's just not really a good dinner conversation.
Yeah. I don't even know what people expect you to do. I think they kind of like have like a vague idea that they're sort of talking about the weather, and they kind of want to be reassured about something, and maybe given some type of factoid that they can then repeat to sound smart later. It's a sort of like a all rolled up into one. Like, they're not asking you, it's like somebody walks down the street, it's like, hey, how are you doing? They're not actually, they don't want a whole spiel about how you're doing. And it's the same thing. People come up to me like, oh, what's healthy? And it's like, it's kind of insulting to ask, this is something I put a lot of effort into, is like a big part of my life. And So I can't just be like, oh yeah, it's a sunny day, it's really nice. Like, um, I can't answer that question in that fashion, and it's like mildly insulting to like, sort of presuppose that I could.
You got to get a Fran.
Yeah.
Fran would solve all your problems. I'm telling you.
So I'm gonna jump to my first health sphere pet peeve,
Mm-hmm.
which is magic words. Um, and by that I mean things that people kind of hand waving, like vegetarians and vegans will use the term plant based or phytochemical to mean like good. Like they're just saying it's good, or this is something special that you need because it's a phytochemical,
Mm-hmm.
or it becomes a catch 22. Like, well, why do you need to have a plant based diet? Oh, it has more phytochemicals, but phytochemicals just mean plant chemicals. So it's like, why do you need a plant based diet? Oh, because it has plant based diet compounds in it. And then I don't know if you remember from the raw food, specifically the raw vegan sphere, people would talk about enzymes. Like if food has enzymes, it's good, and if it doesn't, it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
One time I was even on a forum where somebody thought that they were talking about raw water, like collected from rain, and they were like, oh, well, it's better because it has like the natural enzymes. It hasn't been heated in the water processing plant. And I was like desperately trying to explain that enzymes are not just like magical entities that are in every, oh, they're just like the force, like the midi-chlorians or something. Like, it's not just this thing that's in everything and then, oh, we cooked it, now it's dead. It's, like a protein that does a thing and living things make them, so if there's enzymes in your water, it's actually kind of a bad thing because maybe there's bacteria in there that have enzymes.
Yeah, that not to steal your thunder, that was obliterated for me when I didn't tolerate raw milk. And so I had access to in Southern California like three different or more than that different varieties of raw milk, and they all gave me diarrhea. And so I was like, okay, so much for that idea that somebody's going to tolerate raw milk like way better than just normal milk. And the type of milk I tolerated the best was the UHT ultra pasteurized milk, and so that didn't make any sense to my brain that was so fixated on getting enzymes and things like that.
Yeah. Ray has said, he's worked with people who like that they do well with one milk from one farm and not another, and maybe there's something in the grass that the cows are eating. Like, yeah, people should be pretty open minded to, like, if you're gonna drink milk and you have problems with it, before just throwing it out. I actually got a friend of mine back on milk off of almond milk a few months ago, and yes, it was really great. I have her taking aspirin. Um, I think I gave her Matt Blackburn's Instagram, and just the way that said those things was more convincing to her. So then she sort of did that stuff, and she bought like a nice big red light panel and stuff like that. And her C-reactive protein went down by like fivefold, from the last time she had it to when cutting out, switching back to dairy from almond milk, the red light, aspirin, and a couple other things I can't remember. But those kinds of changes, normal kind of stuff that people like us would recommend. And she had some good results, so that was really nice.
It's insane. Yeah, somebody would. Nobody pays any attention to anything I say that I know. That's amazing. I take that back. I had a ballerina friend, and she had insomnia, and I think she independently learned about Progest E, and when she took that, she would go to sleep. And so again, like the things that actually impact the quality of life in a positive way, it had nothing to do with what I said, but she used it just because it worked.
Yeah, that is tough. That's another problem in this, is that if you have advice that is more chronically helpful than acutely helpful, you have to get a hook for that person to want to do it, and it can be really tough because, yeah, like if somebody's like chronically under eating protein and you have them change that'll probably make them feel different right away. There's a few things that'll make a difference that day or that week, but a lot of things won't, and so it can be really hard. And that's how these religions around diet and stuff spring up, is that they kind of need like a pushing thing, and they need a reason to do it other than an acute effect.
which they all kind of have. Like you could go vegan and go low fat and feel significantly better, or you could go carnivore and clear out gut bacteria or something and feel significantly better. Do you remember Andrew Kim?
Yes.
He, I talked to him on the phone one time, and he was like, I don't think he really liked giving out advice, but the one thing he would tell like almost everybody you talk to that sequestered his advice, he'd say to replace your vegetables with fruit juices. And that was like the thing that he felt most comfortable doing. And he thought it had like the biggest bang for your buck of just doing something minor.
Yeah, that's funny. It's a funny one to pick, but I guess, you have to pick something. Uh, so do you want to do another one of your pet peeves? Actually, somebody has a question for you.
Okay.
Why does my tinnitus get worse after aspirin?
This was asked on one of the comments of the videos. I didn't really specifically know, but somebody did chime in saying that it could deplete glycine, and then somebody else corroborated that and said when they took glycine, it didn't cause the tinnitus. And I think the question I asked to the last person that asked this on one of the comments was, were they dissolving it? And so I'm kind of a big fan of dissolving the aspirin before taking it. In fact, like the few times, I guess I must have the most sensitive stomach in the world. But last time I took the tablets, I was supposed to go on a 4-hour bus to Mexico, and it turned out being like a 10-hour bus ride. And so I was taking extra tablets of aspirin, and it really fucked up my stomach taking them whole. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Do you think it's just because it hits part of your stomach, like with a higher concentration, because it's still solid, and so it's like all at once?
That's my suspicion. And in fact, Ray said as much. He said, you don't want a concentrated acid like sticking on your stomach membrane.
Right. This person actually said they did eat a lot of cheese, kale, and gelatin while taking it and dissolve it. Well, you don't have to take aspirin. If aspirin doesn't make you feel good, you're not going to like die of an aspirin deficiency. It's not a necessary nutrient or anything.
I agree. The only other thing I'll throw out is sometimes this is really going off on a ledge here. I think Ray said isn't like endotoxin associated with tinnitus, and maybe taking the aspirin is having some kind of endotoxin countering effect or something. I don't know. I recall him saying something like that on the Ray Pete email wiki. And so if this person had digestive problems, maybe that would explain it, or constipation or diarrhea or gas or something.
Yeah. So my wild stab in the dark at why that could happen is aspirin will affect, your blood vessels. From what it does, it kind of, that's how it helps with things like headaches and stuff. And so if you have something in your inner ear that is, you have a predisposition to tinnitus, and then you alter the pressure and the flow of blood in that area with a drug like aspirin, it could set that off. It might, and not necessarily that the thing is a bad thing. Like, for example, caffeine could do it, or not taking caffeine, constricting and dilating your vessels, it changes the pressures and stuff. So if there's something going on structurally, a change like that could maybe just, set it off. You could try lower dose, and if it still continues.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse. The one thing I will say is it never hurt to explore a reason that I didn't tolerate a small amount of a substance. And so, for example, like if I took thyroid or aspirin or some other substance and I had some wild reaction, I'd usually ask myself, I was like, is that something like screwed up in my body, or is it the substance? And a lot of times it would lead me down a road of exploration that I wouldn't have gone on otherwise, like trying to see if it really was the substance or some wacky aspect of my physiology.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to counteract the tendency towards doing total elimination regimes and elemental diets and stuff like that. Because not that can never work for somebody and isn't a tool that somebody could use, but the tendency of people to just cut things out when they have a problem with them right away, and then it just seems so common that I've seen that tends to put you on that road towards cutting out more and more things. It's almost like the more you cut out, the less widely tolerant your body is of different foods. And so you just keep shaving away at your different options, and to the point where, then you're not eating as much because you're in a place where they don't have, it's not something you want to do unless you have to do it. You don't want that to be your default thing. It's like, oh, I'm having a problem with this. Okay, definitely cut it out. This is a bad substance.
That was my whole reason for going on zero carb. I felt like I was allergic to every food,
Mm.
and so I was like, oh, clearly these are just not human food, so therefore I should only eat meat.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, that is basically the Michaela Peterson style of carnivore philosophy, because she
It's
came out
called
of
the Lion Diet, Kai.
yeah, sorry, the Lion Diet TM. All right, so I'm gonna hit another one of these pet peeves
Right?
of mine. Number 2, plan trusting,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a pun for the current times, but and what I mean by that is you just need to detox more. Like, oh, you're on crazy restrictive diet, you're raw vegan, like fruitarian or something. Oh, my teeth are falling out. Oh, you just need to detox more, or like low carb, oh, I'm having really bad this and that, fatigue, and my fasting glucose is going up and my thyroid numbers are going down. It's like, how many, how much, and then they'll ask how much carbs you like, did you eat, did you eat carbs this week? Like, you need eat less carbs, that, or fasting, you need to fast longer, more often.
I got so many of those on that April 2019 carnivore video. People were saying, "Oh, you just needed to fast," or there were like more than a dozen of those exact comments.
Yeah. So I guess the issue with that particular pet peeve and this comes up, is these people in defense of their overall philosophy, because whether it's the guru or somebody that's totally bought in, they have significant emotional reasons for not wanting to question the central tenets of their regime. So they'll create unfalsifiable hypotheses around them. So it's like, fasting is good. So if you are doing bad on it, you are bad. And the way that you're bad is you didn't do it long enough, or you ended the fast incorrectly, or there's a million ways, and there's no way out of it, because if you do the thing they suggest and the same thing, they'll just give you another thing, and eventually, if you keep on like that people will just stop talking to you. Like, if you
Or ban you on Facebook.
yeah, they'll right, they'll kick you out of their forum. They'll like censor you on their platform. Uh, so,
I think you're totally right. And I think maybe you talked about it with Leo, but especially maybe this applies for all dietary philosophies or whatever. But low carb especially had a religious type of pseudo religious component to it. Like, you're right, like abstaining from carbohydrate and things like that. Like, as much as possible, I don't think you can find any content that I made like saying that it's all up if a person eats vegetable oil or something like that. I am cognizant of that, and I never try to say, um, oh, this will work when you restrict PUFA for 4 years. Like, I try to stay as far away. That might be kind of true. Like, things might get easier if a person is restricting PUFA, but I don't say that. I try to restrain myself.
yeah, I mean, if somebody asks me something and I give them advice and they try it and they say it's not working, I'll be like, well, maybe that doesn't work for you, or like, it's so foreign to me, the idea that I would scold them in response. Like, it's really, it's like a priest that, oh, I did such and such and whatever. It's like, oh, how dare you question, you're questioning God. I'm his representative on earth and you're a bad person. It's that kind of stuff.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, I think, was the phrase "that's natural." Like, somebody tells you some wild shit, and that's natural. Like, and again, it's not. It's kind of Carl Rogerian. It's not like shaming the person or making them feel weird for what they just told you, because they're obviously forming some kind of bond with you to tell you something that's kind of maybe suppressed or something. And yeah, man, it's people are complex, and yeah, and shaming them for doing something is really, I don't think, a therapeutic approach.
Yeah. I mean, that person obviously doesn't have the person they're talking to's best interest. Like, perhaps they're doing it for the benefit of the audience, and things like that. But yeah, that's not really intuitively. That's not how you would talk to somebody. If you were trying to help them. Speaking of natural, the word natural, that was actually my third pet peeve. Which this is kind of like the magic words one, but terms like processed and natural. So
Mm-hmm.
processed is bad, and natural is good, or unprocessed is good. So natural doesn't really mean anything on a certain level, right? It's like what there's all different. Like you could take two things and say this is natural, like a natural diamond versus what's it called, cubic zirconium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the synthetic. So okay, this is a natural diamond. This is an unnatural diamond. But things in toto, like it really, the synthetic diamond is. I mean, humans came out of nature. They built a factory to make the. It's natural, right? And then processed and unprocessed. Like processed is bad, but I mean, it's better to eat cooked potatoes that have been processed than raw potatoes. Like humans don't do well on raw potatoes, and of course, there's a million examples like that. Things that are at varying levels toxic in their unprocessed forms, and I guess some people would say we shouldn't eat those things then, but
Here's one I'll bounce off you. What about when gurus say the literature says? Who has read all the literature?
yeah,
Like that's my question. I can't stand that phrase. I hear it all the time.
yeah, that's one of my favorites. That topic in general, actually. So the book that I'm trying to do, my favorite like chapter is about the size of the issues within the literature and the issue specifically of its size, and that it's like an unruly beast. And even if all of the papers in one field were good and not fraudulent at all, which is not true in any field pretty much, it still would be almost unusable on a certain level because one could not read and integrate all of the literature into their own future studies. Like if you're going to study diabetes in some fashion, whether it's an animal model or clinically or even molecularly, it's not really feasible that you read all of the diabetes literature before you start your project. That's insane. I mean, even to just read all of the diabetes literature using rat models would be, something that you would have to do all day, every day for years and years and years and years. And you're not going to be able to remember all of it. You're not going to be able to integrate all of it into your mind. It's just too much. And that itself is a weakness. When there's too much, there's people that will write a paper and they'll have a review section where they talk about the literature and they'll just leave out things either by accident or intentionally because that one doesn't really support what they want to do as much as something else, or just simply because there's too much and you just can't include it all.
On the flip side, gurus who say, sadly, we just don't know. For example, in relation to like the safety of long-term zero carbs. So Sean Baker is, I've heard him say this a few times, like a question that has, for a fact has been studied. He'll be like, well, we just don't know. Like not that many people have been on zero carb diets for that long. So,
Yeah, we just don't. Yeah, I feel like they would say that about if you said, oh, well, what happens when fish oil omega-3 fatty acids come into contact with iron, like unliganded iron and stuff in the blood. Like, well, we just don't know the long-term effects of this. Like, the studies are promising for like heart, blah, blah, blah. It's like, actually, we do know. Like, that is an askable and answerable question in the lab. Actually, the literature says something about that.
exactly. Exactly. I want to hear your next one. I'll throw one more at you. So this kind of applies to polysalids, but people are recommending to eat certain foods and then providing said food in supplemental form.
Like liver.
Yeah, that is, and also at egregious price points. I think that is unconscionable. I don't, and also, I mean, interested in your take, but Ray was saying, in the case of desiccated liver, it wasn't even remotely the same. In fact, it was harmful. Like it was creating what would be the right term, like reduced products or something. It was like shifting the positive like electron withdrawing agents in the liver to their reduced form. Would that be the right?
I don't know what he was saying, so I can't really comment. But yeah, that could happen because as soon as the liver, as soon as it dies, all of the active enzymes are gonna like kind of keep running their stuff until they run out of oxygen, and then they'll slow down. But yeah, the energy potential of all that stuff will change over time, and then yeah, who knows what happens when it goes through that all that harmful processing because now it's a processed product. So actually, you could almost catch them in a little bit of a bind there. Like, so would you say a low processed diet is good? Like, oh yeah. Oh, so how about these like processed desiccated organ gland products?
Total contradiction. I think I looked at a video. If they were doing freeze dried, it took like 20 to 40 hours of freeze drying. Like what would happen with those delicate substances in liver exposed to oxygen for 40 hours? Like that can't be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I I would think it would be nice if somebody took that stuff and put it on like a mass spec to see the changes in the different compounds. But I don't know if that's been done.
Yeah, beyond my pay grade. But what's your next one?
Oh well, somebody asked, would supplementing omega nines such as meat acid reduce PUFA in tissue? Does it have any studied effects? I don't know if it has any studied effects. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, but can you even get meat acid as a supplement?
Can you even get meat acid? I don't know. Um, hey,
I
is
feel
it
like this is
called?
a business opportunity, Kyle.
So it's called meat acid. It's like capital M, right? Like somebody's name.
MEAD. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
omega 9.
but it's named after like a scientist. Is that why it's named
Well, that's a
mead?
good question. I don't know that.
I think it is. I think it's a capital M. But it'd be funny if it was named after the drink. Um, I don't know why that would have omega 9 fatty acids in it, but uh, my let's see here. Adrenal fatigue. This is actually it's the same kind of thing as you can eat carbs unless you're metabolically broken.
hmm
Uh, where it's kind of the opposite is like you could cut out carbs unless like if you're really healthy and it would be more dangerous to do that if you were metabolically compromised. So low carbers, when I was on some different forums, they would talk about adrenal fatigue, and a lot of times they would talk about that in tandem with depressed thyroid numbers.
hmm hmm hmm
And these people are just like, oh well, did you eat some sugar or it's and it's so clear, right? So just to just to like lay down the basics, like you cut out carbs and then your body starts making more carbs through gluconeogenesis, which is directed by cortisol and epinephrine, which are adrenal hormones. One's a steroid and one's a protein hormone. And so it's making the adrenal gland do more things. And then they're on this regimen for a long time, and then they start to have symptoms that they look up online that are consistent with something called adrenal fatigue. Okay. And then their conclusion is that it was caused by the normal carb intake that they had before, or something other than what just on the surface, without getting too deep into it, seems like would be a direct causative agent. Like you're changing your diet and drawing on your adrenal gland for more secretions and more activity, and then you get symptoms that are consistent with something called adrenal fatigue. And that just seems like such an open and shut case. And these people they'll be like, oh well, you need to, okay, if you have adrenal fatigue, you need to go from low carb to zero carb, like to clear that up.
Well, I'll bounce this off you. I entertained the idea that I had adrenal fatigue, for a long time, and people said, "Oh, well, it's from your blood sugar going up and down," and of course, burning fat is the best way to keep your blood sugar stable. And there was one other point I was about to make, but your like synthesis of the idea of producing your own sugar through gluconeogenesis is activating the adrenals. I don't recall hearing that a single time in my like exhaustive adrenal fatigue research that I had done.
Yeah. So it's almost like when you go to one place, you can get a certain type of information. Like if you just crack open a medical textbook where you're learning about, oh, what do the adrenals do? And then you look, so, okay, well, they make epinephrine. What does that do? They make norepinephrine. They make cortisol. What do these things do? And you can clearly see how it's like, increasing free fatty acids, lipogenesis, and stimulating gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis and all that stuff, right? All the stuff kind of in the fasted state metabolism milieu, and partially also in the stress milieu. And then you go over to these people talking about low carb diets and adrenal fatigue, and that information is just like, it deafeningly silent,
Or agree and amplify.
right? So I thought it's just one of those things where people are doing the thing that would just very clearly, like a normal doctor would be like, well, have you tried not making your adrenal gland like support your blood sugar 24 hours of the day? Like, let's start with that. And you know what I mean? And call me in the morning. Like, that never comes up. And it's like the exact opposite,
Again, I think carnivore Aurelius. There are people defecting from carnivore almost.
I've never
every
heard
day.
that one. That's a funny name.
Yeah, well, he started posting on his Twitter about orange juice, and people were like, "Has this account been hacked?" No, because he was such like a staunch keto carnivore person. But again, it's like you have to pay the piper, And I think, especially with Ray or this bioenergetic or thyroid or stress approach getting more popular day by day until they shut down the internet. It's just, I think it's undeniable at a certain point, and it will just like what do they say? Over like it just will take time, for a lot of people or a certain percentage of people to realize that they've been sold a bill of goods.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think a lot of those people, and this is going to be stuff I'm going to be touching on in future videos, but a lot of those people are just going to feel like they got burned by nutrition advice in general and just sort of disconnect the same way people are doing in politics. Like, oh, I got burned on like MAGA, and they're just going to unplug again, because, for good or ill or whatever, Trump
I'm going to disconnect because Tom Hanks isn't in jail. Ellen DeGeneres is not in jail. And so I'm disconnecting as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was told that Ellen in like 2 months ago had an ankle bracelet on and was on house arrest for.
Just to be clear, I'm sure a lot of the things said are true about those disgusting people, but like, so not to totally ruin this conversation, but I some of that info was accurate. You know what I mean?
Well, it has to be.
Yeah.
There has to be true. That's kind of something that people understand on an intuitive level. Like if somebody's trying to mislead you, outright lie to you, very rarely will somebody spin something from a whole cloth. It usually, because it doesn't come across as natural. There's sort of a natural way that you talk about things, and like micro expressions, and when you're recalling something, and then you just kind of augment it with things and send people down different directions. Or like if you just want to privilege, like if you're retelling a story about an argument you had with a friend, and you just kind of make yourself sound a little bit better than maybe a neutral third party, if they were watching it, would recount it. It's just natural stuff. And then when you have the internet, which is just a big amplification machine, it creates these huge funnels that do that. They take like, okay, so Hollywood is just a really like awful institution that should be abolished. And so it's really easy to find, individual instances of like bad behavior and stuff. And then it kind of focuses on these people, and it's so salacious, because like Tom Hanks, like, oh my God, he was the nice guy of Hollywood. And it's so like, I don't know why it just catches on. Like some people, it just feels right, for some people to kind of be like, oh, now I hate that guy or whatever. And, yeah. And then it gets to the point where they're like, oh, well, he's going to be arrested. And then like, they'll give like a date and time. And then that date and time comes. It reminds me actually of millennial Christianity, like, oh, the world's going to end in such and such. And then there's always like a cope for why the world didn't end. Like, oh, it's going to end in 1,000 years. And then, there's always There's always the next thing. Kind of like, the unfalsifiable hypotheses of like, oh, you just need to fast longer. You just, it's right around the corner, like perfect health forever. Just one more dry fast, one more year without eating cooked food or something, and you like nirvana awaits.
Totally agree. Didn't mean to divert our convo into weird things that are not allowed to be discussed on YouTube.
Yeah, this is all that's all just in Minecraft. Um,
Maybe we'll find out the secret in 200 years when we're interacting in our virtual reality world, and we'll find a document that says MK Ultra Q, and then we'll be able to figure out the true meaning of it all. Anyways, I'm interested to bounce this off you. Young diet gurus.
yeah, right. I almost put that one, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this includes me. I don't think I know it all, but and it's not like an age thing, like, oh, Ray is 84, therefore he knows it all. But I think there really is something to the wisdom of age in this space, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, well, I mean, we're about the same age, so like I don't I don't have a different age perspective than you in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I started getting into this stuff when I was really young. I think I was 19 in college when I started the raw vegan diet. And you can't really tell somebody at the time because it's very insulting to tell somebody, "Oh, well, you could eat McDonald's all day every day and as long as you're not like somebody who was kind of predisposed to being overweight or whatever, you didn't have health problems when you were a kid, you should be fine until you're like 25, maybe even 30. You'd be like lean and have good energy levels and mood and stuff like that." And if that's the case, then it's hard to take somebody like that seriously saying, "Oh, I've been eating mangosteen every day, and let me tell you," and they're like talking to somebody that's like 55 and they're like 21. And it's like, I don't think the difference between these two people is the mangosteen. Like, somebody asked how old we are. I'm 36.
35.
Okay, yeah, so pretty much the same thing. And do you know how old Paul Saladino is?
I think I did take a second to figure it out. I thought it was maybe early 40s, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, he looks okay. I mean, again, he's only been doing this for like what, 3 years or something.
That was the embarrassing part. No, I think it's less than that. So when did his? I have it on my Twitter, but it was like a year of like a flip flop in a year. By the way, for the record, I contacted Paul to debate Kyle, and Paul was not having it. So just put that out there.
Yeah, at this point, I think it would be hard. Somebody said he's 43. It would be hard at this point because I know that there wouldn't be like if I had known who Frank Tufano was before I went on that radio show, it would have been really hard for me to just speak into the microphone and talk the way I did because I just said what I thought, and the radio host asked me a question, I answered the question, whatever. But if I had sort of known who he was as a character, I might have been a little like emotionally activated or whatever, and it would have been a different kind of thing. And I think at this point, with some of these people, that it would be really hard for me to divorce my feelings about them and create sort of a neutral thing. Like I'm sure it could be done if they were interested enough in doing that, but the problem is there's a catch-22, which is I'm convinced they're not interested in the potential of themselves being wrong. So there's no way to have a productive conversation. Like I am not really I think even though I have so much more experience than he does and have been through, these things for a lot longer, I'm probably less wedded to my conclusions than he is. And that's just untenable, like you can't have somebody, debating somebody else and the person who's kind of newer is more arrogant and sure about themselves being right. There's just something really off about that. It's bad enough when somebody who's more experienced is talking down to somebody less experienced. That has its own, that causes like resentment and stuff and social dynamics. But when it's the less experienced person talking down to a more experienced person, it's just insane. And so I don't think that would work.
Well, I can think of a certain egregious example of that on a debate that will go unnamed. But the other person on the other end started talking to you about performing science. And I think your quote was, "Are you telling me about performing science?" Or
Well,
something.
that was somebody else that sounds like me,
Okay.
and it was a close friend of mine that we share Google. We Gmail, we email each other back and forth, and have Google
Okay.
Hangouts and stuff. And he also has a PhD, but but yeah, it is. It's because so you can kind of ferret out if people are protecting their brand,
Mhm.
and if you're really sure somebody's gonna be in that protecting their brand mode, it's hard to talk to them.
I think you're right, but not that I've really ever been in this position multiple times, but it's like never for the other person. It's always kind of for the audience. Like I think anybody with a few brain cells could have figured out how you were speaking about things and how he was speaking about things. You almost seem surprised at his weird takes that he would give. Like, you just run on paragraphs and not really ever approach the question. So, but yeah.
Right. So we've been going for looks like an hour 25, and how much longer are you good for?
A little longer, then I'm going to start to bonk like the dog in your video.
Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna get fatigue bonked. So
Um,
do you want to do another of your
yeah,
points?
we've talked about a lot of these. Foods are addictive. I maybe you have a no. You I think we shared the same view on this, or I'll just say what I think. So Ray has a newsletter called Biological Addiction and Biological Balance, and so I kind of view it like that. So if a person is drawn to masturbation, or they're drawn to alcohol, or they're drawn to cigarettes, or they're drawn to cocaine or heroin, whatever, I think that is my hypothesis would be that that is in some way, shape, or form having some kind of anti-stress effect or stabilizing effect. And even if it also had a side effect of alcohol damaging the liver or something like that. And so actually, didn't you have another great analogy with the cocaine and the sugar? I'll let you say that, but I think that addiction of the food I don't think is helpful, and it's another pseudo morality aspect to nutrition that I think is incredibly unhelpful.
Yeah, I don't think it was an analogy. I was just, one of the more ridiculous things that people say in the nutrition world, and this is even said in the academic nutrition world sometimes, is that the effect on the brain of cocaine and sugar is similar. So sugar is like hijacking the cocaine system or something, as if there's this bad neurological pathway that the devil created for bad things like cocaine, and then
Mhm.
we came along and we figured out a way to activate it with sugar. And it's not just that like there's a complex reward system from consuming necessary nutrients that's activated by sugar, and perhaps certain drugs like cocaine sort of hijack that and give you that a kind of neural reward, which seems like that would be the kind of sober analysis of, since presumably people have been eating food longer than taking drugs, you know. So if there's like a natural neural pathway that is stimulated by both, it would be weird to say that it's the drug pathway and that the food is hijacking the drug pathway rather than the drug hijacking the food, reward pathway. To get
Unless you already know that sugar is bad, then it's okay.
right, yeah. Well, I guess people have this idea like sugar is super new. Like, oh yeah, we just got sugar. Like, I mean, it's true that it's new that it's put in everything, but people like in Europe at least were consuming sugar in tea and stuff in the 1800s at relatively high levels, depending on their class. Um, oh, sugar causes insulin resistance.
Please explain.
Yeah, I put that one down because so that was the whole the inspiration to the 2017 AHS talk was being at 2016 AHS. And just hearing people say that phrase like as if, oh, like the same way they would say like glycine is an amino acid, like cellular respiration produces CO2. It's like, oh, sugar causes insulin resistance. Like it's just a basic factoid of like you crack open a bio or I guess a physiology textbook and it's right there, like sugar affects insulin resistance, Like sugar is a disaccharide that causes insulin resistance. And I thought about it and I was like, man, that doesn't make sense. But it's really interesting that it doesn't make sense, and that there's a convoluted way that there's like the really dumb way that people explain it. There's like different tiers of almost like conspiracy theory, like sugar causes insulin resistance conspiracy theory. There's the like, well, it raises your blood sugar and then your pancreas gets tired from having to produce insulin and it's resistant. And then, that's not how it works. And then some smarter version would go, oh, well, no, the fructose is kind of preferentially taken up by the liver and can go into like, fatty liver or something and cause the liver to start to become insulin resistant in an insulin resistant tissue. And, or like it produces, gets made into fatty acids to get exported by the liver. And these exported fatty acids cause insulin resistance in other tissues. And there's like different tiers of complexity to it, but really it's just on the face of it doesn't make any sense. Like all of the mechanisms, they require like third factors to happen, and the people aren't looking at those factors. Kind of like when they say cholesterol causes atherosclerosis, and there's just a whole bunch, there's a big reaction that has to happen. And it doesn't even really involve cholesterol, because it involves lipoproteins, which people just shorthand call cholesterol. And then, if there's PUFA on those lipoproteins, it gets oxidized, gets eaten up by macrophages, and they make foam cells, and then they get stuck on the vessels as atherosclerotic plaques. And people are like, well, Jeff, cholesterol just does that. Just like sugar causes insulin. It's like, well, we know because LDL is called cholesterol. So my word for it is cholesterol. And LDL is indirectly related to atherosclerosis. Like, ergo propter hoc, like, cholesterol causes atherosclerosis and heart disease.
Yeah, I was introduced to this concept, or this gave me cognitive dissonance such a long time ago, because I talk about him all the time. But Chris Kresser, I used to do a podcast with him, and so I'd listen to him talk a lot, And one of the things he would say often was that you should, for good health and anti-aging, et cetera, you should eat like a ketogenic, high-fat diet. But if your stress is high, all bets are off, and that can cause insulin resistance and things like that. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, how is that possible? Like, the stress system is so powerful that it can override like the best or the most perfect nutrition. Then why aren't we focusing on that rather than just some like arbitrary diet that cavemen ate? Right. And so yeah, I think your coup de grace was the why to burn. What was it? How to burn free fatty acids, and why you don't want to.
Why? I think it was just why you don't want to be a fat burner.
I thought you just clarified so many important concepts in such a small amount of time. And then the insulin talk was a little bit over my head. Maybe that's why I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. But I think it was almost over the head of everybody else in the audience as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad at gauging audience. Like when I make videos, and even if I just like make a stupid meme on Instagram, I'm like, I really can't get outside of my own. I'm like, this is funny to me. Or like, this makes sense to me. I totally get this. Everybody's going to love this. And then, sometimes they do. And sometimes I'm just getting like after that talk, because after the 2016 one, for whatever reason, that made sense to people, even in the audience. And of course, some people didn't like it because they disagree with it. But like everybody wanted to talk to me afterwards. And it was just this whole thing. And then after the 2017 one, it was more like of the cricket type reaction. And I honestly, I didn't even know why. I didn't anticipate that. I didn't get it. I was like, to me, it was the same thing, but I guess some of the concepts were a little bigger, or yeah, it just maybe required a little bit more background in some physiological stuff.
Your nutrition anarchy was too highbrow the second time.
Yeah. So somebody asked, did PUFA become popular purely because of market forces, or was there more nefarious intent? Just kidding. I think it was, market forces in the sense that they're, the sort of government agricultural bureau type forces were pushing that. It was something that could be mass produced. There was it fits well into a wartime technological production, because we got the factory farming, and then it's basically pound for pound, it's kind of more efficient. Actually, I'm not sure without the subsidies if it's more dollar efficient, but you can make a lot of oil with having these big fields with these monocrops of soybeans or safflowers or whatever, and then pressing them. Now you can't do that without technology. That would be, you can't. It's very hard to get oil out of seeds without industrial. Basically, you can't do it. So yeah, so I think I don't think that I don't think that people were like, okay, we're gonna poison the earth with like making everybody eat PUFA. I think it was a combination of people being prejudiced towards vegetarian is better, so the fats from plants have to be better than the fats, and there was that whole thing happening sort of concurrent with that, demonizing cholesterol and saturated fat, mostly with heart disease. So to me, I think that's what it was. Do you have a...
I honestly don't have a perspective on this. I've never gone through it, but something that was surprising to me was Ray thought that like the introduction of the birth control pill was on purpose to obviously this is actually easier to accept, but like the sterilization aspect. But he said that was like they had hired somebody in the military. I hope I'm not butchering this. They had hired somebody in the military to do tests on radioactive estrogen or something. Anyways, like the whole idea of selling estrogen was more or less a conspiracy, nefarious type of plot to, I don't know, make people infertile or kill them or whatever. And so I don't know. Like you have a grasp on the old studies of PUFA way more than I do. If there are studies showing it having obvious harm, maybe it's just negligence that they promoted those as on the pyramid that everybody should eat.
Well, they did promote the hydrogenation of it. And I think there was sort of an understanding with some of the more chemistry-minded people that, of course, for shelf life. And I think a lot of them thought that it would just end up being the same as butter. And then, so it was kind of different factions, like there's well, animal fat's bad, so anything else is better. And really, science doesn't actually make it into policy. So that's kind of the problem. It's like there's so much science and it's so politicized that policy just cherry picks what it wants from the literature. So it doesn't really matter if there's something showing that there's a negative effect.
I'm just going to make this easy for us and blame goddamn Ansel Keys. No.
Yeah, well, that guy was caught like doing naughty stuff, taking out some of the countries in his graph to make the trend stronger, which it doesn't totally reverse the trend, which I remember Denise Minger was clear on that, which is that it basically just made the trend that he was trying to push look stronger by taking out countries that didn't fit in with it. But they weren't like statistical outliers or anything. So I don't think that he had a scientifically justifiable reason for taking them out. I think that it was just kind of exaggerating and being a little bit misleading. But yeah, he seems like a true believer in the superiority of like plant-based nutrition.
Yeah, but yeah. So not that you said anything I disagree with. Maybe the idea of pushing a vegetarian or vegan, that seems like an outright kind of confirmable type of conspiracy that they do want people really dumb and not meeting nutritional requirements and stuff. But interesting your take on that one, though.
Oh, like the Beyond Meat stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah. That seems more obvious. Like they want you eating bugs. They don't want you eating
living in pods. Yeah, there does seem to be some serious like misanthropic policy desires of the elite class that it's weird, because you'd think, I don't know. It's just, and the thing that's weird about it is they get people to think it's cool. Like they get some content creator to be like, oh, look at my cool pod that I live in. And like, I'm eating my Beyond Meat burger. And like this, I'm in the future. I'm like VR porn, like, Soylent drinking and, and like, yeah, it's like prestige, he's part of, I mean, he's kind of doing the same thing as like somebody who maybe was an acolyte of the church like 1500 years ago and is like whipping himself and he's like, look how great this is. Like I endure, I give myself many privations and therefore am I closer to God. Like this guy is closer to like the soy god, eating Beyond Meat and stuff. So that's really the only way to explain it, because there's no way that that's actually better. We know it's not better for you. It If it tastes anything like meat, it's only good insofar as it imitates meat. So it's just, it's just a simulacra of the thing. So there has to be something driving that behavior. And to me, it's like a religious, the normal religion has kind of been like ripped away from people as like a collectivizing force. And so they're getting into all these weird religions, like with dietary restrictions or like the kind of scientism stuff, like Bill Nye, or now it's like Fauci is kind of, I saw something, a video of these guys. Oh, I sent it to you. The video of
Yeah,
his,
he said it, general Pfizer enjoyer.
yeah, for the average Pfizer enjoyer. It was like 5 guys who have some type of YouTube channel about,
I kind of recognize them. I think they're a BuzzFeed channel. I
oh,
know I've seen something from them.
yeah, well, that explains everything right there. Yeah, and they're like making it cool, like, oh, look how cool Dr. Fauci is. And I don't even like have much of an opinion on that guy. I don't watch the news, so I'm not presented with that guy. But they were like worshiping him, and I was like, literally. And I was just like, this is so foreign to me. I don't, it's like levels that shouldn't be possible. Uh, I was just going to say, do
Yeah,
you have another thing, or do you have something more on that?
a little bit more. We kind of talked about. I forget if we talked about this with Leo, but diet gurus going from 100%. We kind of talked about this. Diet gurus going from 100% certitude to this is one big crazy diet experiment, and you guys can follow me on it. So like pivoting, and so I again, people might think I'm dogmatic or something and saying you can never change your mind about something, but maybe just express less certitude from the start, a person could save face, especially in this kind of diverse dietary community that's happened in the last few years. Like when I was raw vegan, there wasn't like YouTube health YouTube like didn't even exist, and I remember searching for paleo and finding like basically no videos about it. And so I don't know. I don't know. Your take, a good one.
Yeah. What that reminds me of is the practice of like pushing like taking ground and then consolidating your gains. So they take market share with, they're putting out like this attractive product or something like themselves, like their market that make themselves look good or whatever. They have good sound bites and digestible pieces of information and products you can buy, yada yada. They get a big following, and they would not get that big following if they weren't doing the certitude, the presentation as an expert. And then they reach a certain level, and maybe they run into some stumbling blocks with being able to answer certain questions, or they have to modify things for their own health or whatever, and it starts to become embarrassing. And then, yeah, they pivot, but they're able to maintain a lot of those gains. So it's like a consolidation process where, because the other style was like an aggressive growth strategy, and it's like they're kind of like flying close to the sun with this aggressive growth strategy, and then they kind of bring it back a little bit for like to coast. It's like when a company's first formed, it's kind of in the growth phase, and then it kind of pulls back into this like maintenance phase. So they're just kind of acting like it's like a natural sort of systemic way that things go.
And good stuff. What was the last one? Oh, diet gurus that think they own some random idea that they didn't come up with. So obviously, nothing's new under the sun. And I don't know. I think Leo and I have talked about this, but people saying, like again, we talked about this kind of last time, but if you're talking about the energy flowing through a person, forming its function and structure and things like that, you're probably getting that. You're not probably getting that idea from Otto Warburg or Albert St. George. You're probably getting it from Mr. Ray Peat. So, but some people don't outright say that or minimize, I think, where they're getting the ideas. And so again, maybe this is more of a personal pet peeve, but I see that not as often as the other ones, but it does happen.
Yeah, my main problem with that is there's a certain level of value added that I feel like somebody has to put onto an idea to not necessarily credit the original person, or to just, you know what I mean? Like where it's like, okay, I'm kind of doing my own thing. Like, yeah, of course we all, like we didn't invent English, we didn't invent science. Like we're all getting this stuff from somewhere, but there's an amount of original, spin that you put on it of your own that people can kind of see. And then there's people that are so obviously charlatanistic in terms of having no value added at all. And they're just cobbling together things they're getting from other places. And if you're very educated on the sphere, you can just chart, like you can tell them their sources for their position.
Yeah, well said. Okay, in my last two, kind of already talked about this. Guru's overly focused on food, like, oh, you just got to get this perfect mix of nutrients, and then you should be good. And that's pretty obvious. And then this is kind of more inside baseball of the bioenergetic perspective of obsessing with anti-nutrients, but not considering carbon dioxide as a cofactor for something like vitamin K, or not including the metabolism in your nutrition. Just thinking about, I don't know, minerals and things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. Like, I wonder why some things, some concepts take off and others don't. Like the anti-nutrient thing has a certain amount of purchase where people, you can just say that and anybody who knows anything will go, oh yeah, of course. It's penetrated the collective consciousness of like the internet health sphere. But yeah, some other things that are basically the same dynamic, like, well, in this situation, these chemicals act this way, or this is needed, and this and that. It just hasn't penetrated. So you get the blank stare, like, well, okay, do you have enough, CO2, to do vitamin K mediated carboxylations or whatever. And people are like, yeah, I take K2 and I also take, they just step over it because it's not, that slot isn't there.
Obviously, Ray has talked about this for a long time. The funny thing is, I remember a point in the low carb universe where people were like hanging on every single thing Chris Masterjohn said. And in 2013, he had a fat soluble vitamins and their nutritional adjuncts or something. And he specifically has a whole portion of that about carbon dioxide, and not a peep from any low carb keto person that I was aware of said anything about it. And I thought that was odd because like the one thing Chris Masterjohn said, like a new idea he had synthesized, that nobody took the bait, nobody talked about it, and it was basically forgotten.
Yeah. Well, I guess they just figured, oh, we all have that. Like we all have CO2
Like
and
Bart K says, yeah, exactly.
yeah. So I have one more. So that was your last. Okay. And this one is not like a super big thing. But sometimes the names of things are not accurate descriptions of what they are. And people sort of like, oh, cholesterol causes heart disease, but it's not the name cholesterol. But in that case, it's the context put on the term cholesterol. But things
Mhm.
like growth hormone, growth hormone is named growth, it's named growth hormone. Prolactin, it just has kind of this suggestion of what it does, which is one of the things it does. Serotonin, and then also because serotonin has a weird name that doesn't have anything to do with mood or whatever, it's been given the sub name of happy hormone. Um, Blood cholesterol. Oh, that's it. Yeah, the people call the compartments in which cholesterol is sequestered in your blood cholesterol, but it's really lipoproteins that contain many things. Some of them, some of which are cholesterol. So, because you could just as much, you could call LDL, you could say, oh, that's blood protein, that's blood fat. Like it's all of those things. It's a molecule that has all those things. It's not just blood cholesterol. So yeah, with the growth hormone, I mean, there's a lot of problems that people can have, whether they have acromegaly and they produce too much growth hormone, or they're abusing it for performance enhancing, or they're trying to biohack themselves with the fasting thing and extending their fasted time to get more growth hormone secretion. And a lot of people do that just based on the fact it's like, well, it says it in the name, I'm going to grow and that's good. always.
I think Hans Selye specifically mentions that he thought estrogen should have been called adipin because it was mostly produced in the fat tissue, and then he had like another name for it. And in one of Ray's book, he specifically says what you just said, like follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. He said those names were beyond worthless, and that he just referred to them as the gonadotropins, and he doesn't even call them by those names. But I think that's a big one.
Yeah, because they
Yeah.
have to be named something. Like when a protein is discovered or whatever, like serotonin. It
Mm-hmm.
constricts blood vessels. Changes the tone of this serum system, like the blood, vessels.
I think the first name was enteramine, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it before serotonin caught on.
Oh, enteramine. That's a better name. But yeah, because serotonin doesn't have any kind of that. Serotonin is kind of a good name in the sense that it says like a neutral thing that it does. But
Mhm.
it these things are just named after the first thing they're shown to do when they're discovered, which may
Mhm.
not even be a significant thing it does.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because of course, the way serotonin is marketed is not as a vascular tone regulator, but as a mood. And even then, the mood effects of it are even still a minority of what it does. Because most of it is active in the gut, controlling like gut sort of spasms and peristalsis and stuff. But yeah, it's people that are kind of at the one end of the Dunning-Kruger curve, and they sort of just know the name of something, and like a quick Google search or whatever, they can really get themselves into trouble with that little bit of information. It's kind of dangerous. And yeah, the names it's a real shame that sometimes the names of these things have connotations that mean things to people and they read into them, but it's just kind of random what a lot of these things were named based on the sequentially, chronologically, how they were studied.
Brilliant stuff.
Leo says, if anyone is curious about growth hormone, Google Chris Dickerson and check out his left elbow. So, so Leo says it's okay. So that's probably an okay thing to Google and look at. So for anybody that wants to check out that, oh, somebody said essential fatty acids. Yeah, so they just said they're essential. All right, so we're at 1 hour 50, and I think that's a good length.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Kyle. This was long overdue. Appreciate it. My apologies to Leo for my disgraceful act of saying he was not somebody that you should be obtaining your exercise information from. You
I
should.
don't think he was in the chat at that time, so you're actually like really outing yourself. now, now he's gonna go back and watch. Well, now you gave him a reason to go back and watch the whole thing.
Perfect. Even better.
All right. Well, thank you everybody in the audience, and just real quick, I'm going to be making sort of part 2 of the social epistasis um, theories about like why the nutrition sphere is the way it is, the health sphere is the way it is, and then I'll probably do another stream with somebody about that, and so on and so on. And at some point in the near future, hopefully Danny, you and I, and maybe Leo or whatever can do another stream.
Anytime.
And I'm gonna hit stop streaming.